you point out that there's a rule that funds can do this if the buyer and the seller are basically both winners, right? So how was that possible in this case?
Well, basically, the buyer and the seller would agree on a price that's in between the spread on the bonds that the dealer charges, and they both the buyer ends up paying less than they would pay in the open market if they went through a dealer, and the seller ends up receiving more than they would if they went through a dealer.
It's not all about price, right? I mean, Kevin, surely you know this. A price is determined by how much you want the asset, whether you need to hold it, if it's part of your strategy. I mean, does it make sense that different funds could switch assets willy-nilly without one side being at least a little bit of a loser?
No, I mean, so it's not willy-nilly, right? I mean, we have to remember the needs of the different funds here were very, very different. So, you know, whereas the sort of the one fund, you know, needed cash to handle the redemptions, the other funds, of course, then were looking for sort of good assets that would help with their strategies. And we have to remember that, you know, any large asset manager has a fiduciary responsibility back to their underlying investors, and they're not going to make decisions that go against that. If anything, large asset managers are sort of more focused on that responsibility than they've ever been in the past.
Although they essentially held up the price, right? I mean, Miles, everybody on Wall Street expected a fire sale and prices to fall, and yet Pimco was able to manage trading these bonds without that drop in price.
That's right, but the bonds did fall somewhat in price because people were anticipating that Pimco would sell, and by selling internally, they allowed, you know, other Pimco funds to maybe get those bonds at a good price rather than, you know, rather than outsiders.
I wonder how much, Miles, I mean, how much is Pimco in touch with people at Treasury? I mean, this is a large amount of bonds, right? We're talking about $100 billion in outflow. How much of this plan was concerted between government regulators and Pimco fund managers?
Wow, I don't know. I don't know that it was. I don't know that it was at all. Pimco's had a program in place for quite a while where where they can do cross trades between their different bond funds. But
do you, Kevin? Does that cross your mind? I mean, when we're talking about a company that holds trillions of dollars in assets, or a fund that holds $300 billion, does it make sense that they would be in contact with the Fed, be in contact with regulators when they move these large amounts?
Yeah, I mean, we have to remember, right? This leadership change was no surprise to them, right? They knew this was coming, and if we put that on top of the fact that, you know, clearly these are some of the most sophisticated investors in the world, you know, they were prepared, right? They knew how to handle. I'm sure they had, you know, strategies in place to deal with any major redemption, and you know, in the sort of the age that we're in now, you know, these sort of short-term shocks are more common than they've ever been. So you know, all these large asset managers with big positions are sort of preparing themselves to meet redemption calls when they come. So yeah, I mean, sort of, you know, having those sort of conversations and, you know, ensuring that sort of market stability remains is you know, a huge focus, I suspect, to most of these large asset managers.
Do you think, Miles, don't you think, I mean, you do say it was a surprise exit. Now, obviously, there was tension, but maybe no one had expected it to happen as swiftly as it did when it did. Do you think Pimco gets props for dealing with it very well?
Well, sure. I mean, they were able. The fund's performances improved, and the outflows have slowed over the last 6 months. So it looks like they did a pretty good job of handling the situation overall.
All right.
Took a little time.
Thanks so much. Yeah, of course, tip time, but that's a lot of money.